Hello and welcome to Real Talk. I'm Alex and I'm joined by my co-host Nickii.
Hi there.
Hi. And in this episode, you're going to hear a bit of this.
We can't expect to get great talent from all over the UK if we don't let them know what the opportunities are.
And a bit of that.
I'm not sitting here going, it's really important that we're represented all over the UK because I'm trying to be benevolent or altruistic. It just makes good business sense.
Today we're here with this year's IPA President. He's been referred to as the boss who puts people first. It's Josh Krichefski. Hi, Josh. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are
Joining
you?
us live from the airport.
Yeah, from London's Heathrow Terminal 5.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for fitting us in.
Good to see you, Josh. Also joining the debate is one of our IMA experts. She works across 3 of our biggest integrated accounts and she has bags of agency experience under her belt. It's Global Client Director, Imogen Blackwood.
Hello.
How are you, Imogen?
I'm good. Excited to be here.
Good.
Cool. Well, let's get into it then. Josh, tell us, what are you calling bullshit on today?
I'm calling bullshit on London being seen as the part of the advertising industry in the UK.
Excellent, as do we. And obviously we're coming at it from a place of bias, I guess, having spent probably, well, me personally, 18 years in what is arguably the largest agency outside of London, but having had a journey, I guess, in and out of London through our history as an agency. So this is going to be one that we are going to enjoy discussing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking from a context perspective, is it worth us just all talking a little bit about our own experience and where we've worked
Good plan.
over the years from a regionality perspective? So I suppose from my perspective, I started in the regions, so worked in Manchester for the first kind of 10 years of my career. Then I moved down to London to work for MTV from media owner side. So I lived and worked in London for probably 6 years. Met my husband, had kids, found it very difficult living in the capital, moved back up north. So that's, I suppose, my experience. What about you, Josh?
Well, I've always lived in London, to be honest with you, since I've been working. But I've worked with many agencies outside of London over the years, creative agencies. And we've got, so I run in my day job as well as doing the IPA presidency, as I run Group M across EMEA, but also in the UK. And we've got offices in Manchester, Leeds, Edinburgh, Dublin. So our business, those offices are really important for our business and all have really great clients and really great people working in those offices. And they all have their own kind of personalities, like the offices have their own kind of DNA. But they all bring something different and they're all excellent. So I think that's been a real secret to our success as a business, is having businesses all over the UK and Ireland as well.
Imogen, what about you?
So I started in the Midlands. So I was working client side at Boots, went over to an agency in Nottingham. And then I was there for about 2 years. And then I moved down south. And then I've been in London ever since. Obviously, I've got the beauty now of working for an agency that's got an office in the north as well as our London office as well. It's a bit of a mixture.
I guess my experience is almost entirely wedded to our agency, so IMA, and I guess a little bit of colour to our experience. So we were defiantly Leeds for a very long time in our history, and then we had an opportunity to take over what is still our office in Farringdon in London. Did it on a bit of a wing and a prayer, having said we don't need to be there to win the work. Actually, it made a huge difference at that point in time, opening up there, not necessarily the footprint per se, but the confidence it gave us as a business to go and put ourselves out there and have a conversation with brands that might have otherwise not considered a very regional agency. But most importantly, actually, it gave us exposure to a much wider talent pool. Now we'll probably come on to this, but I think at the time that was really, really important, and we were probably expanding significantly in Leeds and potentially running out of increasing numbers of talent, specifically in creative, I would say. But actually when we went down to London and started to be able to hire from there, that was great. since then, I think we've started to see a shift in the talent, and I'm sure we'll discuss those dynamics. But I guess bringing it back to what we're calling bullshit on, it'd be good to get the IPA's take on why this is a topic we want to call bullshit on before we discuss any further. Josh?
Well, I mean, first of all, 43% of IPA member agencies are based outside of London. So that kind of tells you immediately everything you need to know about how buoyant the agency marketplace is outside of London. I think a lot of people don't realise that, but so it's really important to us as the IPA that we're lessening that preconception, and that we work hard to ensure that the interests of agencies outside of London are well represented on all of our major groups and committees, and are listened to when we're making plans, and also that we're sharing all of the kind of best stuff with all of our agencies, no matter where they're based.
And from that kind of preconception perspective, I guess we're looking at it from two angles, aren't we? So I suppose there's a preconception when it comes to new talent coming into the industry that they have to go to London to find a great career in advertising. But I guess there's also a preconception when it comes to some of the sort of big clients and brands out there who think that to get the best, they have to work with a London agency. So would you say that those are the kind of two key streams that the IPA are looking to work with to change preconceptions?
I'm very keen in my kind of my agenda, my president's agenda for my tenure is about attracting the very best talent into our industry. And I think that we're pretty good at doing that, but to be able to do that, you need to be looking at every single corner of the UK, because talent's everywhere, right? And I think you're right. It's very particularly right now in a cost of living crisis time where, it's just very difficult to afford rents in any major conurbation, honestly. That people understand that there are opportunities all over the UK in our industry that are all equally good. And so I think that's the first thing. I think we can't expect to get great talent from all over the UK if we don't let them know what the opportunities are, where all over the country, because some people will be put off by having to move to London purely because of how much it costs to live there. But also, people just want to stay in their homes. Lots of people want to stay in their hometowns where they're happy.
Yeah.
And there's loads of great stuff happening, great culture, great music, great sport, great everything. It's not all in London, obviously. We all know that. So we work in a creative industry, and we want that to be reflected, just like all of the other areas I've just talked about. So that's the first thing. The second thing is clients are based all over the UK, and I think it's really important that not only that for ease, but also I think there's local knowledge, insight that you can only have if you live in a certain area. So, for example, people who live in Manchester know much more about Manchester than people who live in London, right? And we're trying to target audiences all over the UK, so it's important to be able to have representation from around all over the UK, to be able to understand those audiences and those places that they live, to be able to have kind of local insights informing lots of the work that we're doing. So, I'm not sitting here going, it's really important that we're represented all over the UK because I'm trying to be benevolent or altruistic. It just makes good business sense, So, yeah, that's really, I think those are probably the kind of the key reasons for why I'm personally interested in really pushing this agenda.
I mean, I think the talent thing has evolved dramatically pre-pandemic, and then again for different reasons post-pandemic. And so I certainly, a combination of not only, I think a stat we were referencing earlier that for the first time ever, London's population declined post-pandemic, which is kind of indicative of people's choices, isn't it? But actually also, as a global agency, which we currently are, location becomes less and less relevant when we've all got used to working in a slightly more hybrid way. So a lot of our clients might not be FaceTime requiring clients anymore on a global level, and so the ways of working have evolved to support that. So talent becomes kind of ubiquitous if we're open-minded enough to how we find it. But I do think, from our perspective, the challenge lands in from a regional versus capital angle, more around brands and brands' choices around what type of agency they think they need to be working with, and I think that's possibly a topic to discuss a little bit more.
Yeah, I think also the perception around opportunities are really interesting, because one of the main reasons I moved to London was because I didn't think that there was more opportunity available to me when I was in Nottingham. So it was just an immediate, well, I have to go to London because that's where I'm going to progress my career. So I think, the more effort that's kind of made to let people know that that's not the case when you're making those decisions is really important.
Yeah, I think that's the great irony of our industry, isn't it? For an industry that's focused on promoting brands for all these clients, we're actually pretty poor at promoting ourselves and the different careers that you can have in our industry. And that's definitely something that needs to come out of the regions more, I think.
So advertising a lot, you guys take part in it, and I think actually, so advertising a lot, just for listeners who might not know about it, is one day in the year where 91 agencies around the UK, all over the UK, 40% of those agencies are outside of London, open their doors to school kids from I think it's 200 schools. 2,000 schools all across Scotland, England, Wales and Ireland. And we open the doors to them. We give them a brief to work on during the day. They come up with ideas and they come back and they present it to, a room full of creative teams and other senior management in the agencies. And it's an incredibly inspiring day, which really, I think a lot of the kids that go through that day come out of it going, first of all, I didn't even know this industry existed. And then they come out of it going, and I really would love to work in it. I'd love to work in this agency that I spend the day in. And I think that's a very good way of advertising the industry to young people. I think we've done some quite good stuff at the IPA with TikTok. We've done some TikTok ads of different agencies last year, which landed really well as well to push advertising out a lot. So, but I do think you're right. I think there's more to be done. And I think that the IPA's got an important role to play in that.
I also think the wider industry does too, like things like trade press, like the intermediaries who still more or less bias themselves towards a cohort of traditional, for want of a better word, London agencies. That's certainly, if anything, the challenge we face. I mean, you join an agency because it's great people, great culture, great work, and I think we've got that. But actually, to get more of that sort of great work into the regional businesses, I think the trade press, the intermediaries have a job to do to help open the minds of some of those brands to there is a brilliant solution for you outside of London.
I definitely agree with that. I think it's really true. Intermediaries are generally people who have come up through the industry, and most of the friends that they've made are people in London agencies because that's where they worked. Yeah. And so they often don't look further afield. And there is a bias. I would agree with that. I definitely agree.
I found it really interesting going back probably 4 or 5 years. We had a spate of opportunities come into the agency that were specifically citing wanting a non-London biased agency. The fact we had, ironically, they were coming in through our London presence at the time. So the fact we had an office that meant meetings were convenient because they were London based was a good thing. But the reality of the brief was we wanted a non-London biased agency, the rationale being a better appreciation for the diversity of consumer that they were targeting at the time. And that was a really interesting dynamic. I haven't seen quite as many vocally supported briefs in recent times, but that certainly was a trend for a little period of time that benefited us. I don't know if that's continued, but that was quite interesting. To almost go to Josh's point around being closer to audiences. So it's not just about where the brands are, it's where their consumers are. So one of the things that I guess agencies need to be continually mindful is that diversity of talent, and that is regional as much as it is everything else that's covered in that topic.
Yeah. And we see that, don't we, on like just the beauty of us having a US office sometimes when we're working on US work that's in the UK. It's great to be able to tap into the team there, just to be able to, like, would you say this? Does this sound right? You know, it's the same kind of thing.
In terms of that regional versus capital and the ambition for us to overcome, I guess the words you used at the start was the perception rather than it necessarily being a fact. I guess that's the question I've got maybe is, to what extent does that bias still exist, and is it just in pockets? Because the reality is I don't believe that talent is now London-centric. I think we're over that. I also think from an early careers, that's probably not a barrier that agencies are facing anymore. I think there is talent across the UK, and therefore every agency can thrive in that respect. What's your view on that, Josh?
I think certain clients would still say, I want to work with a London agency. So I think there is a preconception that maybe regional agencies might be an outpost to a London agency rather than be a centre in their own right. I'm not saying that hopefully it's clear. I'm saying that's not correct, but I think there is that preconception. And I think there are still young people. I mean, let's be honest, there are lots of young people who could be really great additions to our industry who don't even know our industry exists, let alone whether London's the centre of it.
Yeah.
So I think that's for me is the issue, is that how do you, I mean, that's the thing that I'm sort of trying to, what I'm really focused on is how do we make sure that we are highlighting what the opportunities are in our regions to our people who are either coming out of school and looking for apprenticeships or coming out of university and looking for their first kind of graduate position. That for me is, so yeah, I think it would be wrong to say there's no preconceived perspective on London being the centre. I think that still does exist. I mean, the IPA in itself is in London, isn't it? Although we do a lot of outreach and we do loads of meetings in the regions and we have city heads and they all come together, we make sure that our regions have a voice at the table. The IPA council meetings still happen in London.
But London is still the capital of the UK, so part of this makes me think, that doesn't matter, does it, equally, because London is a global city that we all benefit from having on our doorstep in a way. So I don't think, for me, that's a problem. I think the bias predominantly now sits with brands who, to your point, will still go, I want a London agency because of the perceived superiority of what that offers. And I think that's for me, that's the remaining challenge in this argument.
Yeah, I think there is something else that's linked to that, which is that people want to be able to, it's about ways of working, right? So I can think of a client who recently said to me, I want a London agency because my creative agency, this was about a media agency, said because my creative agency is in London and I want them to be close to each other. And by the way, I kind of buy that. I get that, because I think it's really, I think those relationships, that trio of people spending time together is really important. And when you're not very close to someone geographically, it's harder to do that. So, I feel really strongly that clients should be briefing media and creative at the same time together, and that they should be asking them to come back with joint presentations together as well. And that should work in a quite collaborative way. That's when you get the best work out of both sides. Yeah. And that's easier to do if people can easily kind of hop on a bus or jump on a bike and get to someone else's office quite easily. So, do you know what I mean? I think there's value in that, I suppose. But other than that, I don't see any good reason that you wouldn't be able to find strong talent in creative media, PR, all over the UK, because I think you can.
And I guess that that trio kind of relationship also works best when the client is also based in London, but often you'll see that the client is based outside of London but wants the London agency thing, which makes less sense. And I think some of that is also to do with not knowing necessarily all of the talent and capability that is on their doorstep, which again then is because of potentially things like trade press that aren't representing the work and the growth that agencies are having outside of London as well as it could do. Because that's where a lot of clients will look to, really, for, which are the agencies making big moves, making great work. And if we're not being featured heavily, not us as an agency, but I'm speaking as us as outside of London, it's hard for clients to even know what's out there that could be right for them.
I really agree with that.
So things like this podcast are really important. Obviously, a sort of hot topic up here is the fact that quite recently the government chose to divert spend away from some of the terrible transport issues that we have up here in the north, and diverted that down to London. Like, what do you think that says about the government and their support of regional cities in business? Because I think it hit quite a lot of businesses up here quite hard. I mean, just from personal experience, I commute a lot between Manchester and Leeds, and I would love to jump on the train to do that, to get lots of work done, etc., and calls. But it takes much longer for me to go on the train from Manchester to Leeds than it does to hop in the car.
I think it's a very disappointing missed opportunity. Why did they do it? I don't know. I can't. You never know why they make certain decisions. They, to us, might seem. I mean, it seems for me like that was a really, we were along the way on that, and it was looking like it was going to be great for business. And they changed their mind on it. Honestly, I don't know why they did that. It must have been something to do with cost. But I thought it was really disappointing.
And given we've obviously had some positive moves, I suppose, of major businesses moving from London up to the north, like Channel 4, the BBC, etc. It seemed kind of contra to that pattern. Do you think that those have been important moves for the industry?
I think they're really important moves for business as a whole, but particularly creative industries. I was really pleased when that happened with Channel 4 most recently, and I think we'll see more of that. That's why I was saying, I think the tech companies will follow suit on that as well. And I think, genuinely, like, I'm not just saying this to you guys. I honestly think that the agency world is just going to become more and more buoyant in the regions. I just think we're on a journey in the right direction on that. And I'm not saying that means everyone's migrating from London. I think London has got a bright future as well. But I just think things will become less centred and much more evenly spread around the UK. I genuinely feel really positive about that.
I guess the challenge in terms of profile and reputation for the regions in that respect is that a number of those growth agencies, independent agencies in the north, have been acquired by the network agencies and to an extent lost their identity by virtue of becoming part of a bigger thing, which in turn potentially takes away something, I guess, from the regions, because those businesses that maybe stood for something in Manchester and Leeds become part of a bigger thing, and over time that dilutes that.
I don't agree with that, and I'll tell you why I don't agree with that. It's because that all just creates new opportunities for new independents to come up and set up. And just because of if an agency gets bought by a network, what does that tell you? It tells you the network goes, well, there's value in that place. And that just means that should be inspiration for independents to set up in those places and stand for whatever they want to stand for. So I think
I agree with that. I think my point was more from a brands considering regional agencies. Some of those big players in the regions become less well known in their own right by virtue of being part of a network, and therefore that network's associated with London. So some of that great investment and therefore growth in the region is slightly masked from the brands that are choosing agencies. It was more that angle. I completely agree that the more of that sort of experienced agency business and talent coming up north has fueled a brilliant undercurrent of indie agencies who are shit hot in Leeds and Manchester and will only continue to grow. I think that's mega exciting. I was more coming at it from the angle of it doesn't necessarily help the case when it comes to clients choosing agencies outside.
Yes, but I get it, but also we've had loads of clients who were working with us in London, and then we sort of, when things might not have been working quite as well as they should have done, and we said, do you know what, you should probably work with our team in Manchester, or you should work with our team in Leeds, Edinburgh. Actually, we think it might work better if you for what you want and for what you're trying to do and for the way that you're working. There'll always be a multitude of different reasons for why we might recommend it. And a client, we've had situations where clients have, things haven't been going well. Let's be honest. Sometimes in agencies, client wants to move, or the relationship's not going as well. We've moved them up to another office, and things have got better, and the client's been happy, and it's been great.
And equally, actually, to that point, Josh, not, again, kind of referencing any specific examples, but I guess the region does benefit because when that brand inevitably chooses to go out to pitch, they might have become wedded to the Manchester service provision, but not necessarily that business, and then look out. So, no, you're right. We have profited from those examples where they've turned their heads away from London thanks to a network, and then ended up pitching out to regional businesses as a result. So, yes. Yeah. That has worked in our favour.
I think though, again, in that situation, it starts out because the agency is kind of controlling the move, whereas I think for people who might be prospecting a new agency, or someone's looking for a change in the industry, a new job or whatever, I think people are quite naive and they'll go, okay, what are the top 10 big campaigns that or the work that I like, and then it might be oh, it's this network agent, and I think people do look at it that way, and then agencies in the north don't necessarily get the same look in because they're coming at it from outside. Whereas in that situation, if you're moving a client from London to Manchester, you're still staying in the family, so to speak, as opposed to if a marketing director wants a new agency, they might not look at it that way. Mm-hmm. So I think it is still a bit harder for us if you haven't got that backing.
Yeah, which again, it comes back to coverage, doesn't it? And I think it's like we said, if you're coming into the industry, we need to show up as an industry in the regions for school kids who are looking at, what am I good at and what is the right fit for me as a career. I don't necessarily think that the advertising industry produces that content for schools. Yes, the IPA are supporting things like Ad Unlocked, which is building relationships with schools. But in terms of the actual material that careers advisors have that have a little office in your local school, there's not much in there when it comes to the advertising industry. No career advisor would be able to sit down with you and go, this is what a media buyer does, and you be great at it because you're brilliant at maths, but you also have a creative mindset. Nobody's making those leaps at that level yet, so there's definitely a job to do there, and it's not something we necessarily think about because we're thinking about clients and producing great work, but actually if we're thinking about the future and who's going to come into the business and be the ones that innovate, we need to get on top of that. I think
that's why it's so exciting and reassuring to see the number of apprenticeships that are targeting this industry, because you're right, how do you know you want to work in an agency when you're growing up? Because I can't really describe what that means now after 18 years, so I definitely didn't know it existed prior to coming in. So it's a really hard thing to know you want to do, isn't it? And I think the apprenticeship schemes that we're supporting and having the business now, they are actually really targeted to agency life. That's really exciting to see, that there is a whole set of opportunities being opened up to individuals. But obviously there's a shitload more that needs to be done in that space, and that early careers piece is huge, both from continuing to fuel the agency world with great talent, but also to make sure that we diversify it better than it's currently set up to be. I think that's a really exciting area, full stop.
I think the cross skill as well of all the roles that we do is so important, because I remember when someone said to me, I think you should go and be an account manager in a creative agency, the first thing I said was, no, I don't want to do all the numbers. And then actually now I look at my role, and there's there's an element of that, but there's so much more to my job, and that's a part of it. But I still get to do creative and talk to people and strategy, which I didn't even know what they really were until
I'm pretty sure a lot of my friends thought I was accountant for a long time when I first started in agency life.
Going back to the side of this, it's related to I suppose, opening eyes about the potential London centricity to some of the views about advertising. That was an issue 20 years ago. When I first joined the industry, it was a topic, and it's mad that we're still discussing it now. And I really hope that in the next few years we start to see big change, because I think we now have the technological advances to support it, because with everything that happened with the pandemic, everybody's working in a much more global way. It doesn't really matter where you are in the world. It's about the right fit and the right capability. So we're definitely set up to achieve it, I think.
I completely agree. I don't feel like it's anywhere near such a topic as it has been for all the reasons we've discussed. I do think there is still a job to do to continue to have confidence in the regions about how great our talent is and how great our work is and how great the businesses that choose us are. So there's a little bit of responsibility on the regional businesses, I think, to have a little bit more balls in the way that they promote themselves, and then a bit more support from the industry to open the eyes of maybe those remaining biased individuals and or businesses to the fact that there is great stuff happening across the UK and beyond. Yeah. I think, but I think it's more we're in that phase now as opposed to there being a fundamental issue, is my impression, certainly.
Yeah. And I think that point around balls and confidence, I think that's fair. Like, I think that there are London-centric agencies, some of them, not all of them, are quite ballsy about themselves. They're good at kind of promoting themselves. I think we can be a bit apologetic sometimes.
There's a northern humility that is wonderful and lovely and makes humans really brilliant, but actually as a business sometimes you have to go, do you know what, we're pretty good too. And I think that's what it is. There definitely is a responsibility on the businesses who sometimes play the underdog card too heavily to maybe turn that narrative over a little bit.
100%.
Just to round up, because I think we could go on for a lot longer, I think obviously the view that the best agencies can only be found in London is becoming pretty archaic. And at the end of the day, it makes sense for brands to work with the best agency for the job. I think we all agree. So big thanks to you, Josh, for joining us. We hope you make your flight.
Thanks for having me.
And
Thank you.
Thanks, Imogen, as well, for your great insights too. And we'll see you next time on Real Talk.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.